Over the past 20 years, crisis after crisis has exposed the risks of extreme global integration, financial shocks, pandemics, energy disruptions, geopolitical conflict. What once looked like efficiency now looks like vulnerability. More recently, major powers have started turning economic ties into tools of pressure, tariffs used as leverage, financial systems used as influence, supply chains treated as pressure points. Even long-standing institutions like the WTO, the UN, and global climate forums have come under strain. It's no surprise that many countries are rethinking their exposure. When the rules stop protecting you, you look for ways to protect yourself. A country that can't feed itself, fuel itself, or defend itself doesn't have many choices.
So to translate, Canada's position on the developments in the Middle East remains clear. The Islamic Republic of Iran is the principal source of instability and terror throughout the Middle East. It has one of the world's worst human rights records and must never be allowed to obtain or develop nuclear weapons. Canada and our international partners have called consistently upon the Iranian regime to end its nuclear program, including at the G7 summit in Kananaskis and with the United Nations reimposition of sanctions this past September. We've sanctioned over 250 Iranian entities. We've listed the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist entity. And despite numerous diplomatic efforts, Iran has neither fully dismantled its nuclear program, halted all enrichment activities, nor ended its support for regional terrorist proxy groups. Canada stands with the Iranian people in their long and courageous struggle against this oppressive regime, and we reaffirm Israel's right to defend.
That was the backdrop when Mark Carney was asked about volatility and the possibility of a permanent U.S. baseline tariff, 10% now, possibly 15% later. The question was simple. Should Canada accept that paying for access to the U.S. market is just the new reality? Carney's response was measured. He acknowledged that President Trump has been clear about his view that access to the U.S. market comes at a cost. Sometimes that cost shows up as tariffs, sometimes through regulatory changes or investment commitments inside the United States. We've seen all of it. He suggested tariffs may settle into place in some form. But he also pointed out something important. Many of the trade tools being used are temporary by design. Some measures have built-in time limits. Others are tied to specific justifications. Over the long term, more traditional trade agreements tend to define the structure. But here's where Carney shifted the focus. His answer wasn't outrage, it was autonomy. When the rules no longer protect you, you must protect yourself. That wasn't anti-American rhetoric, it was a sovereignty argument.
Itself. Canada supports the United States acting to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon and to prevent its regime from further threatening international peace and security. And the Canadian government urges the protection of all civilians in this conflict going forward. So with that, I'd like to put in context where the world is, as I said before, where our relations are, where Canada is going. And let me start by observing again what an honor it is to be here and a pleasure to be at the Taj, a landmark that reflects this city's illustrious history and its resilience. My visit is the first bilateral visit by a Canadian Prime Minister in 8 years.
His message was clear. Real economic strength comes from diversification and durable partnerships, not dependence on a single market. If access to one market comes at a price, build 10 markets, then he pivoted to domestic strength. Tax cuts, expanding defense capacity, large-scale industrial strategy, cutting red tape, investment incentives designed to make Canada more competitive, even lowering effective investment tax rates to stay attractive against U.S. competition. That's not reacting to tariffs. That's competing structurally.
You know, you're speaking about volatility in the world, and you talked about the new world order. Despite the U.S. Supreme Court ruling, President Trump is now talking about a 15% tariff. 10% is in place at this point in time. An executive order for 15 hasn't come. Are you prepared, or should we be prepared for a world where a baseline tariff is just going to have to be the way to do business with the US? That is going to have to be the price to access the US market. Is that now a realization and an acknowledgement?
Well, President Trump has been clear for months that being part of access to the U.S. market, you should pay, quote unquote, for access to the U.S. market. Sometimes that's in tariffs, sometimes that's in changing regulation, sometimes that's in investment commitments into the United States. We've seen all of those. I think this will likely settle down into tariffs, but the ability of the U.S. administration to do that over the longer term will be more likely determined by more conventional methods in trade agreements or not, than what are temporary measures. Even so-called 232 measures are temporary in the sense that they're addressing a specific perceived dislocation. And obviously the Section 122 ones that are used now have a...
When asked directly about a potential 15% tariff, Carney didn't sound alarmed. He acknowledged the pressure and then emphasized the need to build long-term relationships you can rely on. In other words, stop anchoring your strategy to the next headline. That contrast defines the moment. One approach reacts to volatility. The other builds resilience beyond it. Speaking on a global stage in Mumbai, Carney didn't escalate. He laid out a framework: diversification over dependence, strength over fear, strategic autonomy without isolation.
At this point in time, given everything that's happening in the world, and as you pointed out, it's a rupture, it's not transient, there's no going back to the way the things were. What concerns you about what we're seeing today the most, in light of the many developments that have taken place even since you made that speech in Davos?
I think I'm more optimistic, but where the
Than you were
concern...
in Davos?
Well, I'm more optimistic because of the reaction to that speech. And there's a sort of public reaction, but then the quality of the discussions with a wide range of countries who are all thinking the same thing, who all realize that there's many areas to partner together, and to be frank.
While tariffs dominate headlines, Canada is working to deepen ties across Europe and the Indo-Pacific, expand its defense capacity, and strengthen its economic base at home. This wasn't just another overseas speech. It was a signal. Canada will not structure its future around paying for access. It will build leverage of its own, and that shifts the balance. Now I want to hear from you. Is diversification and strategic autonomy the right long-term answer to tariff pressure? Or should Canada prioritize stabilizing ties with Washington first? Let me know your thoughts.